Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing the 25.11 patch note rundown. So if your content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Today's patch is pretty small. There isn't actually a huge amount of changes going into it. On the buff side of things, it's mainly minor numbers adjustments. On the nerf side of things, it's relatively similar. The adjustments is where some of the more sizable changes come in. Aatrox is receiving a pretty big change, trying to take some power away from his passive, was encouraging opting into Cleaver and buffing up his sweet spot damage. Annie, I believe, is receiving some base armor, but in trade is losing a decent amount of scaling in her W and through armor growth. Ashe is receiving a change to her Q to enable it to stack on passive, which is a good quality of life change and is just strictly going to be a buff. Garen is receiving a pretty heavy adjustment to try and push him away from one-shot crit builds towards being able to opt into more bruisery itemization. Kassadin is having changes to kind of encourage him to, be a bit stronger early game and make some of his matchups not as polarizing, but in trade is losing some late game power. And Samira is being encouraged to opt into more lifesteal. I believe BT Rush is what they are going for with this change. In the case of systems, it is only Horizon Focus which is receiving a buff, but it is a good buff. It is 5 AP and minus 100 gold cost on the item, so I believe the champions which are already doing pretty well with it in the mid lane will be doing even better. The champions which aren't doing as well in support, which is why they are primarily buffing this item, losing the 10% damage amp was more meaningful for them, are going to also benefit from this change as they were losing some power. Let's get into the balance changes. So we lead off with Aatrox, who is having his passive damage reduced from 4 to 12% to 4 to 8%. The Q is going to be gaining 10% on the sweet spot damage, and the W is having its damage type change from magic to physical. The big concerns I would say here are the kind of, not even encouragement, but just the fact that these are going to benefit the lethality voltaic Psychosword variant of Aatrox more than the bruisery variant of Aatrox, which is always very scary because that build does have some very, very aggressive lethal ranges where flash queuing can just be a very powerful way of just one-shotting a target. That is always going to be a concern when they make changes like this, and when they change things like W to do physical damage, which will also benefit from lethality purchases. That is probably the biggest concern of these changes. However, the passive losing some power makes sense. It is in a very strong spot at the moment. When its damage got converted from physical to magic, most champions are going to just have more armor than they are MR, which does mean that this was, it's just healing him a lot more HP at the moment. But the main things to talk about here are just, the lethality builds. I would recommend trying them out. They might be relatively close, or even, they may be even better than the bruisery builds. But Aatrox does have a load of variations and lines we've seen come out of him, whether that's the Eclipse into standard builds, the Cindered Sky with Grasp, the Electrocutes, we've seen Conquerors, and the lethalities with opting into the Voltaics, the Profanes, the Edge of Night, if those do end up being kind of the way people want to build him. For Annie, she is gaining 4 armor level 1, which is pretty meaningful when you are trading auto attacks with an AD champion in the mid lane. The armor growth is going down quite sizably though. 4.7 is very high for a mage. 4 is definitely a lot more reasonable. I believe, for example, Cho'Gath is having his armor growth reduced to 4.5 this patch, which would have been even less than Annie's armor growth if Annie wasn't also receiving the armor growth nerf this patch. So the 4.7 to 4 makes sense. They don't want her to be as aggressive on the scaling side of things and not as durable just through base stats. The W is going to also be losing a pretty meaningful amount of damage. This is to kind of promote Q max over W max. The damage is going from 70 to 270, 270 to 250, and the AP ratio is going down by 5% as well. This should meaningfully hit Annie. I do think the champion will be a slight bit weaker, as the average player base won't be able to abuse this 4 armor as much as the the scaling armor growth and the W damage loss here. So yeah, we'll definitely definitely for the most part be a weaker champion outside of the first couple of levels into the game. Ashe can now build ranges of focus on attacking structures, which is nice. It's a good quality of life change. It should have always been like this. I'm surprised it's not been like this for as long as it has. Cho'Gath is having his armor growth reduced from 5 to 4.5. This is meaningful for Cho'Gath because he stacks a lot of HP through his ultimate and through his itemization a lot of the time, and having lower armor growth will promote armor purchases. I believe things like Deadman's are all very, very already already very good on Cho'Gath and should become more just outright mandatory purchases. I do think a lot of the time you can even just opt into Dead Man's Rush when you like lead with a Barmies, or you can go like Sunfire Rush. I think there's different ways of building him outside of just the pure either Heartsteel like build where you're playing for Heartsteel stacks and like as much HP as possible, and the Shirali build, which is like the Halo Blades variant. So Cho'Gath, definitely recommend messing around with his builds. I do think he'll be weaker with these changes. Obviously they are a strict nerf at the end of the day, but I do think the champion is in a very good spot at the moment. I still will recommend him as one of the best tank options, especially for mid to low elo. Diana is receiving a big change here. Her passive Moonsilver Blade is going from 225% to 260%. This will massively help her clear. It once again encourages heavy AP purchases as the damage will massively ramp like later on into the game. This has been 300% at like certain points, and it's still not that, so not quite as egregious as it has been in the past, but really nice considering the champion. I wouldn't say he's in a terrible spot at the moment. I still have her as like a solid A tier option. It's just the Liandry nerfs did affect her, but I believe people will start moving over to Protobelt, and a clear increase like this should be very meaningful for her. Diana is definitely a jungler I would recommend playing going into next patch. Elise is losing some damage on her passive in the Spider Queen form. It's going from 20% AP ratio to 15% AP ratio. This is going to mean more in the jungle where you are going to be autoing more with the Spider Queen form. For support, this isn't going to matter as much, and I'd say support Elise is in a very good spot at the moment. Jungle Elise is also performing very well though, so I do think the champion is going to be slightly weaker in the jungle. Slightly weaker in support, but not to the same level as it will be in the jungle. But the champion should still be good, especially in like mid to elite, where this champion really picks up a lot of traction. Probably sit within the high end of the A tier, I imagine. And for support, maybe even remain as an S tier option, if not also a high A tier option. Garen is receiving a sizable amount of changes. The TLDR here is they are trying to push him away from the one-shot phase rush crit variants with like the removal of the, they're lowering the crit damage modifier on the E and like buffing up his kind of like trading pattern, trying to make it so it can be a bit more extended rather than like having to just be an outright burst champion. The W is having its cooldown reduced from 23 to 15 to 22 to 12. The damage reduction is going to scale from 25 to 41. They've removed the 10% bonus resistances after quest completion, which is a nice change. I don't really think this felt that good to have within his kit, and it was just like general power. There were some like bugs with this, and they have updated the tooltip, which is nice to see. Same with the E. The cooldown on the E is going from 9 seconds flat to 9 to 6. The cooldown still starts at the end of the spin. The damage is going to go from 4 to 20 to plus the 0 to 8.2 based on level. It's kind of akin to like the Mordekai's and stuff within his kit, where they throw in the level levers within the kit, so they like scale it up with game time usually, because they want to keep their core like abilities more functional within the game, and that is just being ripped out. It is going from they've ripped it out. They are now just doing 4 to 20 on the flat, plus 36 to 44 on the AD ratio, which is 4% more than it was in the previous patch. But yeah, it's going to be losing the level increase. So there is going to be some level of power shifting around here, but it does incentivize AD purchases. The R is going to be losing 0 to 100 flat damage on it, which is also meaningful if he is opting into the phase rush with the Axiom Arcanist build. That is going to be some damage loss there as well. So Garen, less bursty. I like this change. I think this is important for Garen to keep him like as a healthy champion within the game. He's still going to have moments where if he's really far ahead and opts into like damage, he still can do like almost one-shot combos, but not as egregiously from the same ranges as in the previous patch. Kassadin, I've seen a lot of talk about Kassadin and these changes, about people saying it is a nerf, people saying it is a buff because he's slightly stronger early onto the game. I'm curious to see where it lands. Obviously, in AD matchups, he should probably be slightly better off. The base armor is going from 19 to 21. Small but meaningful. The E is going to have its damage increase from 60 to 180 to 70 to 190. You access this right from the get-go. The R is going to be losing some of its AP ratio though, going from 10 to 7%, and then at max stacks 90 to 78, which will hurt him definitely with like those very, very heavy AP incentive, like very heavy AP builds. If you're opting into more durability, then that won't matter as much as you are opting into like the value of the base damage of this ability more. And the base damage increase on the E is going to also be more meaningful in that regard. I don't like this so much. I think it is probably the wrong way to approach Kassadin. I think Kassadin should be seen as the scaling champion as the mid lane. At least that is what people are like who play the game are like brought up to like kind of perceive him as. I think this to an extent kind of undoes some of that. It's still going to be meaningful. Like Kassadin's late game is still going to be one of the better ones within the game, but definitely going to have had some power siphoned out of it for some better trading power against especially some of those AD matchups. Then it's AP matchups though, I could definitely see him being slightly weaker as he is going to value the R damage later on to the game more than like the close range E potential and the base armor which he is going to be gaining. Lucian, simple change here, 16 to 14 to 18 to 14 on the E. They overbuffed it from what I believe it was 20 to 14 to the 16 to 14 it was on live, and now they are slightly pulling that back because they went a bit too hard. I still think Lucian will be a great marksman. Probably sits towards the, I mean, I think I have him in the S tier at the moment, but he'll probably sit towards the high end of the A tier as like a great option which you can lean into, especially if you are pairing him alongside some of his better options. Rengar, small change here as well. Cooldown on the R is going from 110 to 90 to 100 to 80. Rengar is still going to be an incredibly elite SKU champion. I might move him out of the D tier, but I might also not. Like, I'll think about it. It really depends on just how sizable this change is. I don't think it will be that meaningful that he suddenly becomes a bit more of a recommendable pick. I still won't recommend him for the average player, and only people who have put an insane amount of time into this champion should really be the ones piloting it. Even, like, master junglers, for the most part, can't pilot Rengar well enough to be picking him in almost any scenario. Like, this champion is incredibly OTP dependent. Rise is receiving a pretty meaningful change here. The damage on the W is going from 80 to 200 to 70 to 190. This is nice for like those W max, or not the W max, the W start rises, which W and then just trade with autos. I think in certain situations he might still do that, but the main thing here is the R, well, the passive on the R is going to have its damage increase from 40 to 100 to 60 to 100. This, I've seen some people talk about it as, like, this is going to be really sizable for, like, wave clear breakpoints, and there is a chance he ends up taking over competitive with this. For solo queue, though, I don't know if it will be quite as impactful. I believe that this kind of a change is going to definitely help him, and it might push him, like, all the way up to the A tier, but for the moment, yeah, Rise is definitely slightly under the bar, and could have probably done with a slight buff, but, whether this ends up being the right direction, we'll have to see, like, going into next patch. Silver, small change here. Bonus average on Ricochet is going from 30 to 50 to 40 to 50. The main things, the main kind of breakpoints here are the fact that this is going to help her from like all the way from level 1 to level 13 when you have full points in this ability. Obviously, the closer you are to 13 and the points you have in W, it means less. But yeah, it's a nice change for a champion, which is definitely should probably be a bit above the bar, considering she's a relatively easy to play marksman with not as many outplay tools as some of the other options within the pool. Samira is receiving a pretty sizable change to her Q and R. They are having the lifesteal effectiveness buffed up. They originally did these, like, nerf these down when Samira was really taking over with the older Mortal Shurbo, when that had lifesteal within it. These days, though, there aren't as many lifesteal options she can opt into. BT, Bloodline are like the main two kind of sources which she kind of accesses. I don't suddenly see her going like not BT. I don't suddenly see her going like your Borks or your Mercurial Scimitars. I don't think this is enough of a change to really incentivize that, but it should be nice for those like the BT rushes on Samira if people are opting into that. The W as compensation is going to be losing some of its bonus AD. But overall, I think it's a nice change for Samira, and Samira is definitely one of the harder marksmen to opt into, so I don't think this will suddenly make her a really, really good pick, but definitely help her for some people who are maybe slightly struggling on the champion. Smolder, they went slightly too hard on this champion last patch. They are rightfully like pulling some power out of him. The base armor is going down from 26 to 24. hurts him across the board in solo lanes and in the bot lane, and the base health regen is also going down a pretty sizable amount from 4.5 to 3.75. This will hurt his like general trading. People can punish him a bit better early on in the game, and it will definitely hurt him more in competitive, where like these base stats can matter a lot more in those environments. Good change. I think this is probably the right direction to go with Smolder. Twisted Fate is having his Q buffed from 60 to 240 to 70 to 250. If this was only the late game bit, like the last point bit, then it wouldn't be that meaningful. Like, that wouldn't matter so much. But considering it's plus 10 damage, level 1, this could genuinely change certain wave clear breakpoints on Twisted Fate and help him in like certain spots where maybe he couldn't quite access the correct amount of damage through, just like queuing the wave and like hoping to either kill backlines or maybe front lines. I think Twisted Fate for solo queue is probably still going to be slightly under the bar, but I could definitely see maybe like a spot where Twisted Fate gets like played again in competitive with a change like this, albeit it's not massive, and if it doesn't change his wave clear breakpoints, then he will just continue to not see play. Twitch is receiving an E-change to his AP ratio. The AP ratio is going from 30 to 35%. This is per stack, so this will be meaningful once you get access to the, I want to say 6 stacks on a target. I could be wrong. It might be 5. I don't play Twitch. I don't really see Twitch at this point. He does. I mean, AP Twitch needs it. It's been pretty bad for a while. And I don't think Twitch support or maybe even Twitch mid are suddenly going to make a jump back into the meta options. AP Twitch mid probably has a higher chance. Like AP Twitch mid could genuinely with this maybe like reach certain wave clear breakpoints and just like roam around the map with like the cheaper Nashers and Rabadons. Don't really see it without like Crown Guard as like an option, because that was like the mythic kind of like the option you went on him. The main thing here is like maybe bot lane Twitch can opt into AP every so often if he wants to go like the Nasher Rabadon variant in the bot lane. I don't suddenly see it being like the main way of playing Twitch, but it'll probably be there as like an accessible option on him. So yeah, probably a nice change in that regard. Udyr needed a buff for top lane. Udyr top has been in a pretty bad spot for a while, and Leandry's nerf last patch meant that Udyr jungle was not performing that well for solo queue. I think if you're an OTP of the champion, then you can still definitely get good results out of the pick. But for the average player, this is nice to see. The 10 to 30 on the empowered basic attacks. It's now 10 to 40. Helps his scaling. Helps primarily top lane more than anything. The AP ratio is also going up from 30 to 35%, which is nice if you're opting into some of those more AP heavy variants on Udyr. The storm damage per second is going from 20 to 90 to 20 to 100. This is also really big for top lane Udyr, as getting points in the R and like hitting that level. It's not 9. It's different for Udyr. It's like 11 or something breakpoint, because you have to wait another point before you can put another point in the ultimate. It's meaningful. And I think Udyr will definitely be in a considerably better spot going into next patch with a change like this. So Udyr, definitely a champion worth watching, especially in the jungle, because I think he was already closer there. Top lane, he was really weak. Like Udyr top is still definitely quite far off, but these are big changes, so I could see maybe some people start playing Udyr top again if this reaches certain wave clear breakpoints. Horizon Focus is having its gold cost reduced from 2,900 to 2,800, and the ability power is going from 110 to 115. This is a really good stat stick item. 25 haste, 115 AP for 2,800. I can see champions like Vladimir and just like generalistically a lot of the mage pool opting into an item like this. So definitely worth watching. I think this item looks very appealing for a lot of champions now. On the side of bug fixes, I think the only main ones are like some directional fixes to like Mordekaiser. Why can't I find the bar? There we go. It blends in. So the bug fixes, I believe there was like one which is pretty meaningful for Mordekaiser, where sometimes his Q wouldn't go in the right direction, and there were some quality of life changes towards Pyke's E and the passive heal loop sound effect when you like drop out of like vision of someone and you start healing up your passive. And yeah, those are nice changes. The skin updates this patch are also quite nice to see. The Black Rose skins are receiving slight adjustments. There were no new skins this patch. The new skins come in the next patch, where we are getting, I believe, the Hall of Legends Uzi skin, and we are getting the which is going to be Kaiser, and then the Vayne one in the past. We are also getting Ink Shadow skins, which is Nyla, Pyke, who are the other two? The other Renekton, and there's one more, but I can't remember who it was. Yeah, so we're getting something Shadow Sins. They look pretty good as well. I actually like the look of them. I think in Shadows is a pretty cool skin line. On the side of tier list, I've highlighted, so the yellow adjustments, red are nice, green are bust. I think Ryze and Udyr buffs are pretty sizable. I could definitely see them jumping a tier, or maybe even two if they're like really meaningful for like wave clear breakpoints. Swallow remains as a D tier option in the top lane. I don't really recommend him here, even with the buffs. I think he was fine in Elite in like very specific counter pick scenarios, like old school picks were like Swallow into Cassante, for example. Except Cassante just isn't that popular in his current state. Cho'Gath might remain as an S tier option. If not, then it'll be a high A tier option. I think Aatrox's changes are really big and might push him up to the S tier. Garen, it'll be interesting to see because there is a lot going on with his champion's kit. If the booster builds end up being really functional on him, gives him some more of a failsafe as well. Good to see this champion going up to the S tier. If they just aren't that great, then he might even drop down to the B tier. In the jungle, Elise will probably drop down to the A tier. Diana will probably be bumped up to the S tier. Rengar might jump up to the C tier. I mean, he's the high end of the D tier. I still don't really recommend him even with the buffs, but he's better definitely for like OTPs. 10 seconds off an ultimate does enable him to like find those access points a bit better. Udyr builds are performing quite well at the moment. The buffs were obviously Phoenix form skewed, and I do think that with those kind of like level of changes that he might jump up to the A tier. I'm going to remove Cho'Gath off the jungle tier list. He doesn't really need to be here anymore. It was only because he got buffed that he was only like seeing play there. Cho'Gath mid might also drop down to the high end of the A tier. The Annie changes overall I believe will be enough, and she might drop towards the low end of the A tier, maybe even B tier. Garen, once again, kind of similar thing to top lane. Kassadin might remain as a C tier option. I don't really recommend him at the moment. I think he's a bit too low agency, but these changes are going to be more agency skewed. Twisted Fate and Ryze, respectively, could both be bumped up a tier, depending on like the wave clear scenarios. Smolder and Lucian, I think, will be dropped onto the A tier. I think Jim will be bumped back up to the S tier. Ash changes, probably leave her at the high end of the A tier. If they're actually that impactful, then could also be jumped up to the S tier. Don't think Twitch is going to move from the A tier. Sivir might move to the A tier if they also end up being quite sizable and like enable her to kind of more consistently CS and trade a bit better early on into the game. Samira, also another champion worth watching, might get pushed towards the high end of the C tier, maybe even B tier if people like figure out that BT Rush ends up being like really good on her. For support, this role had the least amount of changes this patch. In fact, no direct role changes. The main things are like Horizon Focus will probably move like Xerath back up to the A tier. Any changes might drop her down to the C tier, although it was some power like early on into the game, so could remain as like a B tier option here. At least might just remain as an S tier option. The changes are very jungle skewed for like her trading patterns and for her like clearing. So yeah, those are all things worth watching. But overall, those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.